All right, welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here. You can watch or listen or subscribe on RTÉ.ie, Apple, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be discussing the weekend's League of Ireland action with an extra focus on the Louth clubs in the men's Premier Division and Bohs parting ways with Declan Devine. We've live Champions League involving Arsenal, and we'll be reacting to Liverpool versus Manchester City. So to do that and also start building up towards the Republic of Ireland men's team's international friendly window, which will be coming at the end of the month, I'm joined by former Drogheda, Shamrock Rovers, Longford Town and Shelburne defender Graham Gartland and journalist Barry Landy, who regularly covers the Louth beat and is the author of Emerald Exiles. And lads, welcome along. How are you keeping?
Good, Raf. Good. Raf, how are you? How are you, Barry? Okay?
Good, thanks, Graham.
Yeah. Now we'll start on Ireland. Obviously, as we discussed last week, John O'Shea is in interim charge for these two games against Belgium on the 23rd and Switzerland on the 26th. And the squad is going to be named on Thursday at around 1 o'clock. And we'll listen to a clip of him shortly, just discussing or just giving a little bit of an idea which way he might go in terms of the squad selection. But Graham, I presume you're not expecting too many changes, just given the playing pool that's available, and maybe the only players we might get to see called up that we haven't really seen on the pitch as of yet. Jake O'Brien, who's doing really well at Lyon, and then also Sammy Smodics, who's been banging in the goals for Blackburn in the Championship.
Yeah, they're the only two really that I can think of myself. You're looking at that Mikey Johnson's obviously flying, so people are going to expect to see him. But obviously, Sammy Smodics is the one that people keep talking about because of how well he's done in the Championship. I think he's 21 goals at this stage, which is a big tally. It's a big number. But like, he's been in a couple of squads, but he's tend to have left of his own accord. That he's just ended up and going. So I think he'll be called in. Whether he comes and plays, that's up to him. But like you said, I think John has two games. I think he's just going to probably not make too many changes and not be too drastic with it. But there is a lot of players playing in the Premiership at the minute that are doing like reasonably okay in terms of like Collins, O'Shea, Omar Babadele, Egan, Cullen. They're down the bottom half of the table and fighting. Obviously, Collins is doing well at Brentford. Bene's doing really well at Luton. But I can see him maybe just keeping the status quo as is. I think Seamus Coleman will be in, whether he plays too much. I know Everton have a lot of big games coming up as well. So, but I think the likes of Seamus just being around the squad is massive, and that will help John as well. So things like that, I can just see him sticking with the status quo and trying to keep a happy camp and build up for if and when the new manager comes in April when it's announced.
Yeah, and Barry, I suppose with the theme of your book as well, Emerald Exiles, there's that look at players that are on the continent, and obviously things have changed very much now in regards to with the Brexit rules and that, and a lot more younger players heading on to play for clubs either in the top five leagues or elsewhere. And Jake O'Brien is one that's been catching the eye at Lyon, and also Troy Parrott had a good spell at Excelsior in the Netherlands, and Festy Abasele has been getting plenty of minutes at Udinese. So there's that extra thing of keeping an eye on what's happening further afield than the UK as well.
Yeah, Rafa, I think John O'Shea mentioned that last week when he was speaking to the press, that he was looking at players in France, which was obviously a pointed reference to Jake O'Brien, and I think he might have referenced Italy as well, where Festy Abasele is playing at Udinese, as you say. Yeah, I'd expect to see those in. I'd expect to see both getting minutes. John O'Shea will know Jake O'Brien, very familiar with him from his time as a coach with the under-21s. Paddy McCarthy will obviously know Jake from his time at Crystal Palace as well. So there's a really strong link there between the two coaches and him. And just given the fact that he's playing regularly for Lyon in, a leading league on the continent means that, in my eyes, he would be a shoe-in for the squad. Now, I appreciate the centre-back is an area where we have been well-stocked in recent years. Even Andrew Omabamidele since January is virtually playing every minute now for Forest. So it won't be easy for Jake O'Brien, or it won't be a case that he will just walk into our squad, into the starting 11 by any means. But I do expect to see him get minutes. I also expect Festy to get some minutes. I know towards the end of Stephen Kenny's tenure, he did get a couple of caps. I think he has 2 caps now for Ireland, but they've only been brief substitute appearances. I know there were calls for giving him more game time, considering the amount of minutes he was playing in Serie A, and also the fact that we were having a bit of trouble at right back at one stage. Seamus Coleman was out, Matt Doherty was playing on the left, and Stephen Kenny was putting Alan Brown in there. I think a lot of supporters just had a desire to see Festi given a shot rather than just given a couple of minutes late in games. So the fact that John O'Shea has sort of pointedly referred to him as well, I think he'll see some minutes definitely.
Yeah, you mentioned John O'Shea's interview there, and he was chatting to Tony O'Donoghue last week. We played a clip which was around the backroom team last week, but this here is more on the shape of the squad and the playing style.
Looking at the style of play, I mean, do you think about changing that? Because obviously formations have to be fluid in the modern game, you'd say.
Yeah, look, it's a case of let's see who, when we name the squad, the fitness of the players available. You have to take into account the opposition, how they're going to set up too, and as you mentioned, being very fluid. But we're fortunate, I think, with the players that we'll have in the squad, we'll be very adaptable in terms of change of formations during the game, beforehand, or whatever the case may be.
But you were part of the setup when Ireland were playing three at the back. Will you think we'll stick with that? Would that be your feeling for the moment?
It could definitely be, because obviously the talented group of young defenders that we have, as well as the experienced defenders we have, it's definitely a strong part of the team. So it could definitely be the case. But as I mentioned, whether you're building in a 3 or a 2, whatever the case may be from the back, we know we have talented players to do that.
You've got talented goalkeepers as well, and one of your goalkeepers, Caoimhín Kelleher, has been making headlines again recently. So Gavin Bazunu has been the number one in recent games. Is that one difficult choice you've got to make?
You have a difficult choice to make already, but look, that's what you want, and you want players performing at the highest level possible. And it's been great to see Caoimhín, obviously, over the last, say, month or so, perform at the level he's had. And obviously Gavin's been so consistent as well for Southampton. So hopefully they arrive in a couple of weeks over to Dublin in one piece, and they're fighting it out for it.
What will that be like from the other side for you now, going to games, watching games, hoping your players play well and that they don't get injured?
Yeah, look, it's all the learning curve for me, and it's one I can't wait. And I know, look, obviously been involved in international football for so long myself, that it's just part and parcel. The boys will be just concentrating on doing their best for the next game that they can, and then obviously when they come into camp, then concentrating on the next game, which will be Belgium in the Aviva, hopefully with a packed out Aviva with the Irish fans screaming us on.
We've always said that Stephen brought along a lot of players, he gave debuts to a lot of players, and that there's great potential in this squad. You'll hope to unlock that potential, I'm sure. But talking about Evan Ferguson in particular, I mean, he's shown how good he can be, but the goals have dried up for him recently. Can you figure out why?
Look, you know for a fact that Evan is going to be scoring goals again very soon. It's like, I suppose strikers have that throughout their career. You look at all the top strikers, they have the little spells in terms of a run of goals and a little quiet spell. But you know one thing with Evan, he trains properly, he looks after himself amazingly well. So you know he'll be doing the extra work needed if possible to get that bit of luck. And once he gets that bit of luck in front of goal, the goals will flow for him again, no doubt.
All right, so that's John O'Shea there speaking to Tony O'Donoghue last week after being confirmed as interim manager. And we'll come back to Kelleher and Bazunu very shortly. But Graham, there's also an under-21s match on the 22nd. They're playing San Marino, and granted, that's obviously can't underestimate teams, but I think Ireland would be very clear favourites there. There are kind of players who are borderline, who have been capped by the seniors, who would be leading lights for the 21s, and Sinclair Armstrong and Andrew Moore, and then potentially Joe Hodge as well, who's been doing okay since he's gone out on loan from Wolves. What way do you think they would go with those ones who maybe where there's a bit of a flip of a coin in terms of which squad they end up in?
I do think there has been maybe a more joined up thinking approach regarding the FAI since maybe Mark Cavan has come in, that he wants to integrate all the squads as much as he can and have a where it flows up and down, and people think, right, I'm involved with Ireland, but I might flick between the both, and I think that's good going forward. So there's not the stigma of, oh, you're going back down to the 21s, or you're coming up to training. So the likes of Sinclair Armstrong, who came on in the Holland game as well as Festi, the likes of him, Oidemo Maku, who's doing really well at the 21s as well. The two of them up front have formed a really good partnership. Oidemo Maku's doing well at Millwall, and Obafemi's there as well. I think he's gone on loan from Burnley, if I'm right. So they're obviously playing at the same level, so there's nothing to say that either of them can't step up. Joe Hodge was on the bench one night for Wolves and then basically went straight and done a transfer straight away. So it shows how eager he is to play. So he's another one that's captained that team. Will Smallbone has come up and made an impact, and he's obviously been between the 21s a lot. So I can see them mixing the squads and seeing what comes out. These internationals are tough in terms of, I heard Gary Neville mention it, that a lot of the club teams don't really like their players going and playing too many games during these internationals with the run into the season and what's at stake. So it might be a case that some of the 21s do have to step up and play, and I'm sure they'd be more than capable and really excited by doing it as well. John O'Shea's really good there in terms of backing Ferguson. There is a lot of pressure on him from an Irish point of view. I think at Brighton they're a little bit calmer about it than probably we are, but we sort of need this striker to come and get us goals. But I think the bigger picture is fixing who's going to be our manager and how we're going to play going forward. And Evan will be a massive part of that for the next 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, and then Barry, the Kelleher-Bazunu debate. Now, it's probably a very easy solution given there's two friendlies. They probably each get a game, but that, as you know, obviously Allison being out has given Kelleher an opportunity, and he's taken it with both hands, and he's been brilliant. But that's probably parking the overall debate now until either June or September, depending on what Kelleher's club situation looks like by the time we get to the competitive games.
Yeah, and obviously it depends then on the next manager and what they decide to go with. Obviously, John's just temporary, so whatever John decides will not be set in stone. Yeah, look, as you say, there's two friendlies, so I think the obvious solution is just to give each a game. Keeping Kelleher so impressive again, yeah, on Sunday. I mean, he has really, really stepped into the breach there for Liverpool and hasn't looked out of place. What was actually, I know we'll talk about that game later on, but what was interesting watching that game at the weekend was both Man City and Liverpool, two of the biggest clubs in the world, ended the game with their reserve keepers, and it didn't necessarily seem like that because Ortega and Kelleher were so composed and really contributed to their teams. Yeah, look, it's a tricky one. Bazunu's had an up and down season for Southampton in the Championship. He is that little bit younger than Kelleher, of course. But he has got more top level, I suppose you'd say, game experience. Kelleher's been in and out, but has played in really, really high profile fixtures. It's a great problem to have, like it really is. I know managers say that a lot, but for us to have what appears to be two really high class goalkeepers is a great situation for us to be in. Not ideal, like only one can play. You'd want two high class strikers or two high class centre mids or two high class centre backs maybe, but yeah, look, it's more of a longer term issue I think for Ireland, how to kind of get the best out of those. It could very well be a case that both are playing regularly in the Premier League next season, depending on Kelleher's situation. I know it's a debate point whether he should stay at Liverpool or whether he should go somewhere. I'd be of the opinion at this point that he should probably go somewhere. He's had that Champions League exposure. He's won medals. He's proved himself a very, very capable goalkeeper. So I think at this point he would be in demand by a lot of clubs, and I think now is probably a good time to strike and probably go out on his own at this point.
Yeah, and the squad, as we said earlier, is going to be named on Thursday, and of course Mikey Johnston is definitely going to be in it, and brilliant since he's gone to West Brom. That's, I think, 6 goals in 9 games now, and then he scored a lovely solo goal against Coventry, and one of the goals he scored yesterday as well was brilliant as well. But we're going to turn our attentions to the League of Ireland Premier Division, and we're going to have live coverage of Galway United and Shamrock Rovers on RTÉ2 and RTÉ Player on Friday. And the results at the weekend: Shelburne beat Bohemians 2-0 at Dalymount Park, and as we discovered on Sunday, then Declan Devine and Bohs have parted ways. Derry City continuing their good form, and particularly Patrick Hoban has been in excellent form up front since signing for them. 3-0 winners over 10-man Waterford. Galway and Drogheda drew 0-0. Pats beat Dundalk 1-0 to get back on track, but leaving Dundalk a little bit mired at the bottom. And then on Saturday night, Sligo Rovers and Shamrock Rovers drew 0-0. But Graham, we're going to start with, I think, the obvious main headline from the weekend, which is Declan Devine and Bohemians parting ways, and the director of football, Pat Fenlon, coming back for essentially what is going to be a second spell, albeit it's an interim charge, and he's going to be assisted by Derek Pender. Where do Bohs really go from here? The name, like Alan Reynolds' name has been mentioned by the Examiner as one of the front runners. I think Richard Dunn's name has been sort of brought back in again. But as a club, and also in regard to this vacancy, like what would you like to see them do in terms of pushing on and trying to challenge higher up the table?
They've had a lot of investment in terms of the new stadiums coming. They changed the full-time football at the start of when Declan Devine came in last year. They had a massive spike with that. They went on an unbelievable start to last season. Afolabi was a massive part of that. I think once he got up and running, he became at times unplayable in certain games. And a lot of their play was directed around him. In terms of going forward, they have structures in place in terms of Pat in as the director of football, and the other structures in place. Underneath it, they've gone back in and worked with Kevin's a little bit, because that partnership had maybe not dissolved, but sort of been watered down a little bit. But they've tied that one back up again. So a lot of the players that you see coming back from who have gone away from Kevin's to the UK would have landed sometimes back at Bohemians and then done really well. They've tied that back up a little bit. They need somebody that's obviously going to give them a way of playing going forward. And I think some of the criticism under Devine was they didn't have a sort of a tactical way of playing or a set way of playing. There were certain games when I saw them where I thought, okay, they look good, but they sometimes change to suit what opposition they were playing. And that can be a good thing as well, because you're shown that you can adjust to the games. But other times they probably didn't implement their own really game plan, other than maybe Afolabi playing off Clark. So it's been hard for them, because I think sometimes in the transfer market they've been a little bit, I'd say, unlucky or hit and miss at times. Grant coming back, you're expecting big things from him, and he probably hasn't hit the ground running as much as he would have liked. The likes of Cornwall and Buckley, who have come back and been really good servants to the Bohemians, but have picked up ACL injuries, and that would have hurt them in terms of their dynamic going forward. They've shopped a lot in sort of the Polish market in terms of players, but Polish players that would have played in Scotland a little bit, that would have been our hearts and stuff like that. And some of them, it takes them a little while to maybe get used to the league too. They're going to miss Afolabi, and you've seen that with the opening 4 games. Declan Devine was really good to deal with whenever we dealt from through RTÉ or anything like that, and he seems like a really nice bloke when we speak to him, and he'd be disappointed. He brought a lot of passion and heart back to Bohemians and brought them to a cup final and all them things, and he deserves massive credit for instilling that sort of atmosphere in the club. But Bohemians have decided it's time to move on. Alan Rellens is really well thought of in football circles. He's done really brilliant as assistant up in Derry with Rory Higgins, and he's done great. He's doing great with Keith Long. If his circumstances are different, that he decides to take the number 1 job at Bohs, he'd be a really good fit. Richie Dunn would be obviously, if he puts in, he's a really big name that gives us 2 ex-internationals in terms of Damien Duff and Richie Dunn, and opposite dugouts as well. Vinnie Perth would be one of the ones that would be interested in it as well, I'd say. But they need somebody that's going to put in. We talk about a 5-year plan and all this stuff, or a 3-year plan, but build them in such a way that when the new stadium comes, that they're already out the gate and they're ready to go, and we know what we're getting from Bohs week in, week out.
Yeah, and Declan Devine, his final interview as manager, he was chatting to Tony O'Donoghue, and also Damien Duff was as well, from the Shelburne point of view. And of course, they're top of the table at the moment at this very early juncture in the season. So let's listen to both of them. But first, Declan Devine.
Declan, clearly very disappointing to lose the Dublin derby, and the manner in which it came as well, because until the penalty, you were well in it.
I think it was very little on the game, Tony, but Dublin derbies are about winning, and we didn't see it through. Obviously really disappointed, but disappointed that the 2 defeats this week are really extremely hard to deal with. Tonight I felt we made subs just before the penalty to try and go and win the game. And I think we've caused our own problems again, to be honest. There's no point shying away from it. In the penalty, we didn't know what was over our shoulder, and then we've lost our man or been out jumped from a set piece. So ultimately, it's something that, it's not good enough, and we have to take it in the chin.
You asked for a response after the Drogheda game. Do you feel you got that response from the players?
Honestly, I think we started the game quite well. It was really difficult in strong conditions. It was 2 teams I felt that cancelled each other out, as all the games against Shells have been. But we've lost 2-0 to a rival here, and it's not good enough. It's all about results. That's where we are. So the 2 defeats this week have been really hard to take. Better performance, but not good enough to win it. But when you're not good enough to win it, you have to make sure you don't lose it, and we didn't do that tonight.
Damien, top of the league, 3 more points at your closest rivals. How does that feel?
Yeah, it's a great win, and as far as pleasing as the win was, Tony, I'm glad that the lads aren't overly excited in there. Just like, we've ticked off 3 points, it's our job. We move on to next week. Maybe a year or two ago we would have got really excited by it, but no, great win. I don't think we've won here in 12, 13, 14 years, so it's big, but we move on.
Now you've got another Dublin derby next week. You've got to go to Pats. All these Dublin derbies, will they take a lot out of you, because there's a lot of energy involved, a lot of emotion involved?
There's a lot of energy and emotion coming in and working with me every day, Tony, but we'll manage their loads. They've got their first weekend off in 3, 4, 5 weeks this weekend, so they can rest, recover, probably have a night out, and they'll start again fresh as a daisy on Monday.
What can you do with the season then? I mean, top of the league, is this coming quicker and earlier than you expected?
Listen, I'm not looking too far ahead. It's a nice win. I never got carried away with anything positive or negative in my life, so we're top of the league, 13 points. Woo-hoo.
Well done.
Cheers, Tommy.
Woohoo indeed. And if eyes are windows to the soul, I know there's a little bit of red eye there on the video as well. He's got Shelburne in the soul already, quite clearly. But contrasting fortunes obviously in North Dublin there between Bohs and Shelburne. We talked about the Bohs side of it. Shelburne claimed the bragging rights in that game and built off a penalty and a set piece and a clean sheet as well. Graham, what did you make of the penalty? Obviously the angles, maybe it's not always quite clear cut, but Cian Byrne bringing down Sean Boyd in the box.
I think it's fortuitous for Shelburne's point of view that it ricochets through, and then I don't think Cian Byrne knows where he is and thinks I'll just swing and clear it, and he's probably kicked the leg first, and Boyd has made sure he's got the penalty. And I referenced Damien speaking to somebody the week before saying Will Jarvis needs to go down in the box. It's not diving, but it's, as he called it, this word that everyone's using, the dark arts, and making sure you get the penalty. And I think he'd be happy with that one. And Sean Boyd took full advantage, and Jarvis scores the penalty. And he's been the one with Moylan going. I think Jarvis has been so creative for them. They're so well drilled tactically. They're so well drilled in terms of defending crosses, defending wide areas. Joey O'Brien has had a massive influence on that. He's someone that I would have coached with as well, and he's big on it, and he's constantly doing it to make sure that they're there all the time. And Malloy touched on it. He's like, defending crosses, we've become so comfortable in it, because of the work you do during the week. So that all that work alleviates any type of anxiety that goes on in a football pitch. So full credit to them. They've become really solid and really tough to beat. They play when it's on to play. When it's not on to play, they don't. But when it is on, they will pass. Lunny in midfield, again, really good left foot or foot, and will whip balls around and play. But they've been excellent, and I think that's what's probably put pressure on Declan Devine, and that Damien's been at Shells 2.5 years, and he's implemented how they're going to play and pushed them up the table. And I think when maybe Devine going in at Bohs, he probably hasn't had that same impact he did in his first probably 6 months. But I think Damien and what Shells are doing they're on the push up the table, but they just have a set way of playing, and everybody knows the jobs, and there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, and Shells 13 points from a possible 15 at this very early stage of the season. Pats, meanwhile, are on 6, and Dundalk just on 1. And Barry, this was sort of an awkward game for both clubs, in a sense that they were both coming off quite a poor and difficult run. Pats win 1-0, and of course it's a Rory Keaton goal as well, and it's good to see him now. He's up to 2 for the season. But just first on the game as well, because there were some awkward decisions that Pats had to make, especially in goals. Danny Rogers coming in for Pitaluga, who'd been a little bit shaky in his first few games, and also Dundalk having to make a change in goal too.
Yeah, look, it kind of the same but different, Raf, in the sense of the word from Dundalk is that George Shelby, he actually wasn't in the squad for the past games, that he's picked up an injury. Now, he was taken off early in the Sligo Rovers game, and Dundalk say that's an injury, and he obviously wasn't involved on Friday. With Pats, John Daly has been very upfront about it. Pitaluga was dropped. his performances weren't up to it. John Daly referenced his mistakes in the first few games of the season, including in the President's Cup, where he felt his performance was under par. And he's brought Danny Rogers in, and he's kind of issued just a warning to Pitaluga that just because you come in on loan from Liverpool doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get games in the League of Ireland, which I think is good. I think is really good. I think there is a sense maybe from supporters that when they see their players or they see their club bringing in players on loan, that there's an obligation maybe that they have to play, or that the parent club will
put in a clause or a demand.
Put in a clause that they need to play a certain number of games or whatever. John Daly, spoke after the game that I'm sure Liverpool want Pitaluga to play every week, but he won't be put in purely on the basis that he's on loan from Liverpool. His performances have to be up to it, and he'll know that. I actually referenced that Pitaluga was a bit shocked when he was told he wasn't playing the game, and John Daly felt that was a good thing. That he was confident and that he expected to play regardless of how things have been going for him so far in a Pats shirt. But yeah, look, as you say, both clubs had been coming off back-to-back defeats going into that one in Inchicore. A big win for Pats just to kind of settle things down a little bit. I think a third straight defeat would have been really, really damaging for them. I know there was a lot of buzz about Pats going into the season that, they're title contenders potentially and things like that. People were very excited about their signings. For me, I wasn't as excited, a little bit underwhelmed, because you have to take into consideration as well the players they lost. It's not simply who's coming in, it's who's gone as well. Sam Curtis is a huge loss at right back. Mark Doyle, who was a very consistent performer for them, is gone as well. And a couple of others. So it's not simply a case of adding strength to the squad. They're replacing players who've left, and it'll take a little bit of time, I think, as well for Pats. From the Dundalk point of view, I mean, they haven't scored a goal from open play all season. All they've got is Jamie Gullen's free kick against Shamrock Rovers on the opening night. It's been a dire start for Dundalk, really, really, really dire. Not what Stephen O'Donnell wanted, given how last season ended, failing to get into Europe. They were in contention for most of the season. Even on the last day, they were still in with a shout, if not particularly likely. But this year, it just looks like it's going to be a relegation battle for Dundalk.
And so, how worried are you? Obviously, as you say there, it's a relegation battle, and already, I suppose Stephen O'Donnell has kind of referenced that he's aware that he will be under pressure, and the way the league is this season with Galway and Waterford coming in, being quite strong, hitting the ground running as well to varying degrees, that just ups the ante a little bit for. I know Sligo was probably one of the clubs that was mentioned in that regard, but they've done, started okay. Obviously, trashed Dundalk 5-0, but Dundalk themselves. You don't want to be getting cut adrift at this stage.
No, certainly not. I think Stephen O'Donnell spoke towards the end of last season about, I think even it might have been the last time I was on this podcast, Raf, and I was telling you about how he was railing against the negativity around the club from supporters and from the media. This isn't going to do anything to mitigate that. The close season was difficult in that fans weren't particularly taken with the recruitment. So I think Dundalk brought in 10 or 11 players in the off-season. One of them was from the League of Ireland, and that was Dara Keane from UCD. Apart from that, it was all loans and permanent signings from the lower leagues in England and Scotland. That didn't set supporters' pulses racing. This start of the season has obviously been an unmitigated disaster. The point they got against Shamrock Rovers on the opening day looked good at the time, but now when you consider on the whole sort of Rovers start of the season, you start to think, okay, maybe that was more to do with Rovers being under par than Dundalk being particularly good. But yeah, look, Stephen O'Donnell has talked about how there's a lot of negativity around the club and he wants to change that. And he's referenced repeatedly wanting to get back to a point as it was under Stephen Kenny, when he was a player, when he was captaining the club. The reality is Stephen Kenny had a team who were winning not only games, but leagues and cups and getting into Europe. It's very easy to be positive around a club when that's the situation, and when supporters are going to Oriel Park every second week and watching brilliant football, which they were for most of Stephen Kenny's reign, if not all of it. The fact, Stephen O'Donnell keeps referring to last season how they were always in contention for Europe, even up to the last day. I watched a lot of Dundalk last year. They rarely played very well. They weren't a good side to watch, and having the likes of Pat Hoban in that team was key, because Pat Hoban's the kind of player who, you have an off day, you don't play particularly well, he'll stick across into the box, he'll get his head in it, he'll score, he'll win you the game 1-0 or 2-1 or whatever. They've now lost that as well. Like, the departures haven't really done much to appease fan sentiment up in Dundalk either. Hoban's gone, Dan Kelly's gone, people like that. So all in all, it's not good. New ownership as well, so there's a little bit of upheaval there, and I think that's adding to the question mark over Stephen O'Donnell, because as we know, owners come in and quite often they want their own people in the back, and they want their own people maybe in the dugout as well. So there's a lot of pressure on O'Donnell.
The point you made about them only signing one player from within the league, and then to touch on Stephen O'Donnell's point of, oh, well, we want to get back to when Stephen Kenny. The good thing about what Stephen done really well was he signed the best players in the league. He signed Horgan.
Yeah.
He went out and got these players off other teams that were doing really well. He went and signed them and said, well, I'll take Sean Gannon off Pats at the time, say, who was in and out, but becomes one of the best right backs in the league. Like, he took Andy Boyle off Shelbourne and turns him into a really good player as a stalwart. Like, Richie Towell goes there and does really well. But when they were flying, they were taking players off other teams in the league that were excellent. Benson, McElhenney, all these players that were doing really, really well for their clubs at that time ended up at Dundalk, and it was such an attractive place to go because of Stephen, because of the way they played, because of the finances involved, all them things. The only thing that made it unattractive was probably the ground, which is exacerbated by the fact that it's not doing well at the moment. So everybody goes, oh, wouldn't be going to Dundalk now? Because again, it's not seen as attractive as it was during the time and its success. Because winning trophies will mask a lot of stuff that people will overlook, because look, we're going really well, we're playing in Europe. And I think to get back to that, to make it more attractive, they need to build it up. They need to make it into a better place to go, more attractive place to go, a more attractive place to play football, so that players are willing to go, well, I will travel up to Dundalk and play. And try and build something again, because again, the Dublin clubs are now in. Pats are probably in a better position. They're training in Abbottstown. Bohemians are training in DCU. They're in a better place to attract players. Rovers have a better facility. All them people, Shells are training in the AUL, which are building up their facilities. So all their facilities are becoming better, where the players who are in Dublin doing well are going, well, it's not worth me while going to Dundalk anymore. There's nothing to gain from it. So it's very hard for them to attract players in the league to go there now. And that's just to touch on Stephen's point of getting back to the Stephen Kenny way. It's going to be very hard to do that unless they build up their infrastructure.
Yeah, and obviously we're talking at a point where, look, it's only 4 games into the season, so we just have to take note of that.
The league's mad, Raf. I thought they done really well in the first game, and then
they did.
The keeper was excellent. He played for crosses. He done really well. I thought, got a good keeper here.
Yeah.
And you're like, we done a podcast to start the season. I was worried about Sligo, but Sligo have come out of the traps unbelievably well. So
so it can shift very. But the one thing I did want to touch on, the point, and I might put it to both of you as well, just the point you were making about, I suppose, the Stephen Kenny years and then where Dundalk are now. And obviously there was European prize money, and you've talked about the ground and I suppose the overall structures of the club, and that sort of link and that legacy line between the good times, where there's going to be some great memories that'll be, I suppose, cherished forever by the fans, but where the structure is now, and there doesn't feel to be a huge amount of change. I might put that to you, Graham, in terms of, I suppose, that missing link of a legacy.
There's not a lot to criticise Stephen Kenny's reign at Dundalk for. Like, it was unbelievable, and they were brilliant. Like you said, you go and watch them. I played against them at the start of it. They were an unbelievable team, one of the best teams ever produced in League of Ireland. But again, and I touch on this as somebody who's been through it, so it's not a criticism of it. It's the fact that when you go back to these grounds after leaving success, you've left trophies, but you know, what would fans rather, and this is the question sometimes you need to ask, would you rather have unbelievable success in the team but go to a stadium that isn't fit for purpose, or have a stadium that's fit for purpose, and then build towards success. And that's ultimately what teams need to get to here. And I went through it, Drogheda as well. We go back to United Park, and again, it's not an attractive place to go, but we brought success to it. But that goes with the players when they leave and stuff like that. So it's about trying to put an infrastructure that makes these clubs attractable all the time. That there's facilities there that are good. There's a better pitch. There's a better place to play. I know it was very hard for them to do it because they didn't own the stadium. I get that as well. So it's not like I'm saying just build up the stadium. They don't own it. So very hard for them to do that. So I'm not saying that it was easily done. I'm just saying there should have been a plan around maybe improving it going forward while they were going through this success. Because eventually, when there is a little bit of a drop off or a plateau, there's something there underneath it that still makes Dundalk a viable asset for players to want to go and play. And that's ultimately where we need to get there for all our teams, but especially the provincial teams that are on the edge of Dublin, where, look, like you see it with Pat, for example, Dean Linus leaves because the affordability of him living in Dublin with a family and stuff like that. He could have done that at Dundalk because it's probably a little bit cheaper to live in terms of renting and stuff like that. So then, but if the infrastructures are good, that becomes attractive to people like that. And that's where they probably need to be. But I do think there is a gap there, and it all comes down again to infrastructure. And if we can improve that, all the clubs will improve going forward. And we've seen that with Drogheda getting the D's back to buying their ground back, and they're able to improve it. I know there's talk of them improving the dressing rooms and all the area for the players and stuff going forward, which is great. They won't want to put too much money into it if they are in fact looking to move to a new stadium further down the road, but they do need to make it a bit more attractable for the players who are going there, and especially for the fans.
Yeah, and that's
sorry, Raf, just on that point, like Graham, they're talking about the players, but it's also about supporter, infrastructure as well. Because the worrying thing for Dundalk was the first time in the season against Galway, they had over 3,000 in Oriel Park, which is a good crowd for Oriel. Against Sligo then on the Monday, they had 1,600.
Yeah,
that's a huge drop off. Now I appreciate it's a Monday night, it's not a Friday, so there's always going to be that drop off, I think. And obviously, having lost against Galway, it wasn't ideal. But if the team's not winning, people are going to be much less willing than themselves to go to a stadium that isn't really a stadium. It's a ground, and the facilities aren't great, and there's just not much to it. Okay, so that's very, very important for supporters as well. You need to give them something that they at least want to come to, and aren't sort of looking for a way out or looking for an excuse nearly not to go because it's not particularly comfortable.
Yeah, and mentioned Drogheda and their ground there. Now they were on the road on Friday on Friday, and they drew 0-0 with Galway. So probably a good point for both. Galway have been brilliant so far. But obviously last year when you were on the podcast, Barry, you were talking to us about the Trivella Group, and obviously they own Walsall in the UK as well. And you gave us a bit of an insight into how fans over there, what they make of that ownership group, and then what changes they've made there. We're starting to see signs of what Drogheda's future is going to look like. Obviously, Kevin Doherty has gone full time. The playing staff not as yet, but the big news, of course, as mentioned already, is Weavers Park and them acquiring it from the FAI. So, can you just talk us through that and exactly what this means for the club going forward? Because it seems to be an exciting starting point for them.
Yeah, exactly. So essentially, the FAI have owned United Park for the best part of 35 years. There was always a repurchase option on the ground, which Drogheda have now activated. Through Trivella, they've injected their own capital into actually making that happen and taking the ground back into club ownership. Look, it's obviously a really good move for the club in terms of it's an asset, and it's the most valuable asset any club can have is their home ground. Where it is in Drogheda as well, as Graham will know, it's prime real estate there as well. It's beside the HSE, the hospital own a lot of land around that area in the cross lanes and the Windmill Road. So there's potential there for development from either a private maybe developer or from the HSE or whoever might want to buy that ground in the future. And then Drogheda plan on using that money then to go and put towards building a new stadium on the south side of the town. So that's the plan. It's obviously not going to happen overnight, I don't think. The immediate plan for Trivella is to make, as Graham said there a few minutes ago, make some small alterations to the ground as it is at the moment, just to make it more amenable for players and for supporters. They've done a little bit of work in the off season, but not much. They were like really, really restricted by the fact they didn't actually own the ground, so there's very little you can do. They've improved, I think, the TV gantry. They've improved the press box area. They've put in some extra seats. And a few little cosmetic changes, but nothing major. So there will be some work done. I know that the club are keen to get to work on that now pretty much immediately, now that the deeds are back in their hands. The move by Trivela Group essentially kind of mirrors what they've done at Walsall. Within 6 months, I think, of taking over Walsall, they bought the deeds of the Bescott Stadium, and they're now in the club's hands. So I think they've bettered that at Drogheda. I think they've done it within 5 months in Drogheda. So they're very much, their whole thing is kind of under promising and over delivering, which I think is probably a good strategy rather than the other way around. Drogheda's new stadium, look, it's not gonna arrive overnight. It's gonna be years in the making. A really key sort of infrastructure point on that is the port access Northern Cross route. It's a new road being built in Drogheda, which will link north and south of the town without going through it. That will lead to the area just up past Green Hills, where this new stadium is earmarked for being built. So that's really important as well when it eventually arrives, just having that infrastructure there. So look, it's a major stepping stone for the club. It's a big development, but this is all going to be, a long-term thing as opposed to short or medium term. But it's really good news for Drogheda. It's all positive. The season didn't start brilliantly with back-to-back defeats, but even the win then against Bohs last Monday and then the point away in Galway has just eased a little bit of pressure there as well, because it's one thing going into the season with lots of positivity. You start losing games, all of a sudden that changes. And as you've alluded to, Raf, as well, just the makeup of the Premier Division with Galway and Waterford being so strong. Drogheda, I think they'll have a tough season. It won't necessarily be as comfortable as last year when they were never really in a relegation battle. This year they could find themselves in that. But look, it's generally speaking, it's all positive, I think.
Yeah, and speaking of Waterford, they lost up at Jerry City, and it was the Patrick Hoban show. Patrick Hoban, who we obviously mentioned earlier, Graham, and there's a mix of goals here. There's the tap in sort of in the 6-yard box. There's the penalty as well, and then in between there's a little pièce de résistance.
A fallen overhead. Yeah, it was.
However they go in doesn't really matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, we done really well. Watching the goals back on it as well, like they just switch off from a free kick and it's played down the side. I think it's cut back, and then that's where Hoban's gonna be, is in between the goals, and that's where he does best. The other goals are probably this is where Waterford probably just need to recess sometimes. It's a downward header and then it goes under a couple of defenders' feet and they're swinging at it, and that little bit of composure that we said about in the box, and if any type of lapse in concentration there, Hoban's going to be onto it, and that's what he does for the second goal. And for the third goal, I think it's McMullen's onto it as well. It goes under Kukulevic's foot and then Leahy's sent off, I think, because of it. He ends up making a foul and Hoban steps up and scores a hat-trick. But that'll give him confidence. That will give the team confidence in knowing that in a stuffy game like that, where they're struggling to break people down, Hoban will get a chance and more likely to take it. These are the games where I think when they have teams penned in and they're constantly having possession and resetting and it's waves of attack, eventually they're going to get a chance to him and he will score it. And I don't think they've had that in a long time. I don't think they've had that under Rory Higgins. McGonigal was good at times and he showed flashes of it, but they never had somebody that was just constantly moving in the box or moving to stand still, where he's driving front post, put the brakes on and gets a tap in. And he's been excellent. And it just shows you, like, you were 1-0 down against Pats and then you come back and it's 2-1. You were 1-0 down against Rovers, then they're winning and then it goes 2-2 and then they go and beat, and it's become an unbelievable start to Derry. But the other games against Pats and Rovers were on a knife edge. But these are the games they should be winning, which is the home form, a promoted team coming up to them, and they go and take care of business, and it sets down a little bit of a marker. But like, we're 4 games in here, and I do these podcasts with you for the last 3 years, and I say it all the time. The league doesn't settle down for another 10 games,
10
because
games,
then your suspensions kick in, then your squad depth kicks in. But then your squad depth kicks in where players who haven't played for the first 10 games are thinking, oh, I'm not really wanted around here, or I might have to play. And it's about how together your squad is as well, in terms of how the players on the edge of it are implemented and how they're used, because eventually you're going to need them going forward. I think Roy Keane touched on it, talking about how important they are, the players that are going to come in and play games, plug them in whenever they need to go in and play. And I think that's what we'll see as the season progresses.
Yeah, and then Sligo Rovers as well, Graham. I mean, I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but they, that's an impressive point. I know Shamrock Rovers have started slowly, but clean sheet, and they seem to have the better of the chances as well. And I might just put Simon Power, who was very influential in the game. There's that incident with Leon Poles, where Leon Poles rushes out and fouls him, gets a booking. What did you make of that incident, and I suppose how it was adjudicated?
I thought, if it was the other way around, I think Shamrock Rovers would be looking for a red card. So I think it's right that Sligo are looking for a red card. That's the way I'd look at it whenever I look at decisions and going, if that was given against us, would I be annoyed about it? And I think if it was given against Shamrock Rovers, I think they'd be annoyed about it. So I think when people say, oh, but there's a covering defender, it's similar to the offside rule. That covering defender becomes like the goalkeeper. So if a defender takes down a player going through on goal and he takes away the chance of him having a 1v1 with a goalkeeper, it's a red card. I think if a goalkeeper takes down a player and stops him having a 1v1 with a recovering defender, I think ultimately it probably is a red card as well. I think it would have been interesting because it was the 73rd minute. Be interested to see how Sligo would have pushed Rovers with 15 minutes to go down to 10 men. Simon Power has been a really good addition to Sligo. They've managed to keep him fit. He hit the post in the first half. Bringing Max Mata back is brilliant for them as well, because it gives them a focal point to work off, and Power can time his runs off him. Ed McGinty coming back has made them strong, and they've really strengthened their spine a little bit, which probably the second half of last season they really, really struggled with. So that's where their improvements have been. And again, they were excellent. The pitch isn't helping them down there as well. The way John Russell wants to play, it didn't help probably Shamrock Rovers going there the way they wanted to play. Ultimately, was it a fair result over the course of the game? I don't know. Sligo think we had the better of the chances, but tough place to go in terms of the conditions to go and get a result. But Rovers, and I think Stephen Bradley touched on it, he's happy to come over with a point.
Yeah, and
another
yeah.
Sorry, Raf, I was just going to say another name there that Graham didn't mention. Fabrice Hartman, I think, is someone that if Sligo can keep fit, because he's had a lot of injury trouble when he came back to the club last season. He just never really got a really strong run. But as you say there, they've got, I think, certainly enough threats in their sort of front line with Hartman and Power and Mata. If they can keep them all fit, Sligo probably don't have the depth, but if they can keep those front players and first line players fit, then I think they could have a half decent season. Yeah.
Yeah, and a final point on the Premier Division. So, of course, we have the live game between Galway and Shamrock Rovers on Friday night, and Eamon DC Park is going to be a tough place to go, Graham. And with Shamrock Rovers having made a slow start, they'll have to pick up 3 points at some stage, given Shells have made a good start. Derry City have plugged away and put a run of wins together, but Galway, that's going to be a tough place for them to get anything from.
Galway's home record last year was brilliant. They only lost to Galway or to Bohs in the semi-final of the Cup, which we done as well. I'll be down and doing the game for RTÉ down there. So looking forward to it. It'll be a sellout. It'll be a massive atmosphere. I think Rovers get 400 allocation as well. It's a great weekend of sport in Galway. The Dubs are in town as well on the Saturday. You can do that on your GAA podcast, Raf. But yeah, it's a fantastic weekend of sport, and I'll kick off with Galway v Rovers. Again, it's a tough one for Rovers in that they're the champions and you expect them to go there and win. I always think the onus is on the home team to take it to teams as well. I think Galway pick and choose the times to go. They're struggling for firepower at times. John Caulfield touched on it after the Shelbourne game. Chances are feeling fewer in this league than it was for them last year, and they're not maybe taking them small chances that they're getting or even getting shots away. And it was similar the other night. They're struggling to be creative. They need a lot from Hurley to produce that, and his set pieces and with his left foot. But I think they'll call Rovers trouble at times, just by being up against them and at them and putting balls into the box with long throws and things like that. But Rovers eventually will have to show why they've been champions for the last 4 years, and no better way to do than going away to Galway and showing them. And yeah, it makes for a cracking game on RTÉ.
Yeah, and before we discuss the first division and also some of the action in the UK with Liverpool City and also Arsenal, who we have live Champions League coverage as well, the Women's Premier Division season kicked off on Saturday at Talca Park with Shelbourne and Sligo Rovers involved in a 0-0 stalemate. Both teams are going into the new season with new managers. Owen Weirin succeeding Noel King at Shelbourne and former Athlone town boss Tommy Hewitt in charge of Sligo. Both of them were chatting to Tony O'Donoghue afterwards, with Hewitt the happier of the two.
Owen Weirin, head coach of Shelbourne Women. You'd be disappointed not to have 3 points. How did you feel the girls played?
Yeah, look, I think we'll be disappointed, obviously, with how things went over the 90 minutes. I think if you look at the possession stats, it doesn't necessarily translate into goals. And I think for all the possession that we had, I would have liked us to create a few more clear-cut chances. I'd say we probably had 3 or 4 good chances in either half. And on another day, if they go in, it becomes a different game. But look, we just need to probably be better in the final third, and we need to bounce back, and what better game than Peamount next week to do that.
You came up against a goalkeeper in outstanding form as well for Sligo, you'd have to say.
Yeah, look, she made a couple of great saves. I think the 2 that she made against Noel in the first half are outstanding saves. And look, Sligo and teams are going to come here and they're going to want to limit the mistakes that they made, and that was the case today. They were well organised, they were difficult to break down, they slowed the game down and when they needed to, and frustrated us at times, and that's going to come up. That's what we're going to come up against every home game this year, and we need to be prepared for that.
Do you think Tommy Hewitt has managed to put his mark on them already?
Yeah, look, it's written all over the side there, and you can see that they're fighting for him, and they're willing to do the dirty work, I would say, and make the game ugly. And as I said, we just need to worry about us, and we need to realise that maybe other teams are going to do that this year, and so we'll learn from today and move on.
Tommy Hewitt, Sligo Rovers head coach, and Tommy, a point in your first game. You must be very delighted with that.
I'm over the moon, Tony. Yeah, look, very good Shelbourne team. Probably the right time to play them because they're just not in the rhythm yet. But our girls put in a massive shift there today, and so proud of them.
Considering how many goals Sligo conceded last year, to turn that tap off is something.
Yeah, look, it's early days yet, but to come up here and not concede a goal, it's a massive lift for the girls. It's massive, and it shows them what they can achieve once we bed in properly. And it's going to be a long season, Tony.
At the end there, Emma Doherty almost had a chance to win it for you.
Yeah, I just said it there that she could have nicked it, but look, Emma's a terrific player and she will get chances like that, and she will score a lot of goals. Yeah.
So what is the ambition for Sligo Rovers women this year?
Just keep working hard, Tony. Honestly, keep working hard and try and push up the table, but it's going to be difficult. As I said, playing Shelbourne first game of the season was the right time to play them.
And champions Peamount got off to a winning start with a 2-0 win at Cork City with the goals from Erin McLaughlin and Karen Duggan, and that sets them up nicely for a big game against Shells this Saturday coming. Shamrock Rovers will be at home to Wexford on Saturday, and both teams will be looking for a first win of the season. Collie O'Neill's hoops drew 1-1 at DLR Waves, with Anya Gorman scoring a late equaliser from the spot, and Wexford, who had 2023 to forget, losing 2-0 at home to Bohemians, with Fiona Donnelly and Eva Brennan on target for the visitors. And Galway United, who were fourth last season, got the better of last year's FAI Cup winners Athlone by the same scoreline to set themselves up for a good start, and they will face Cork next, while Athlone will need to bounce back at Bohs. Treaty United had a bye week, but they will get their season underway at home to DLR Waves this coming weekend. And the men's first division, just some of those results: Athlone drawing 1-1 with Kerry, Finn Harps losing 1-0 at home to Cove Ramblers. It's a 2-2 draw between Treaty United and Bray Wanderers. Wexford 1-2 away at UCD, and then Cork City on the Saturday night 1-2 at Longford. And Graham, just looking, I suppose, at the table as it stands so far, Treaty United made a really good start, 3 wins in a row before that draw. Cork City, I suppose it's kind of as expected, they're top on goal difference at the moment, but probably the slight surprise is UCD to an extent. Obviously, again, we have to always note it's very early in the season, but it's a slow enough start. Wexford are also level on points with them, but we have to note as well they had a very disrupted schedule, so they haven't played too many games. But UCD are probably the interesting one, because maybe early on they would have been expected to maybe push Cork City closest towards the top.
Yeah, I think when they came, the year they stayed up, they had an unbelievable young talented squad, and a lot of it just got picked off. Some of them went to the UK, some of them went to Italy and things like that, and they've lost a lot of their good players. And then you seen them last year, I think even Todd goes up to Derry. So when they went down, I just thought they're having to reset here, and they're probably even going younger. So it's going to be a tough year for them in terms of the travelling and stuff in that league is off the chart. You expect Cork to be where they are. Harps have come as well. It's a little bit skewed because Wexford and Longford have only played 2 games. So it's hard to see. And obviously Wexford pick up their big win. Treaty started really well. They were 2-0 up in that game, actually. And young Thomas Morgan, who's son of Tommy Morgan, who used to play for Pats, got the equaliser. Another young player at Bray. So he scored the equaliser with 2 minutes to go or 3 minutes to go. So it was a good comeback from Bray going to Treaty, considering the form they were on. Wexford will come as well under James Keddy. And Ian Ryan, probably a big season for him in terms of trying to push Bray and make sure that they have a go at trying to catch Cork, who seem to be front runners at the minute.
Yeah, and we'll turn our attentions to Liverpool versus Manchester City. So 1-1 draw there, and it just leaves the Premier League table very tightly poised. Arsenal on top on goal difference, level on points with Liverpool, and City just 1 point behind. And Barry, I'm sure you were keeping an eye on this as well, but I know it's been described as a thriller, but again, huge amount of tension, and it seems to be really, it was sort of mistakes and slips that really where the goals came from.
Yeah, I thought generally speaking the play was pretty high quality, Raf. But as you say, like there were a few errors and things like that leading to goals. I thought Liverpool on the whole were pretty outstanding, actually. I thought City started really well. I saw City from the first 10, 15 minutes, and I thought they're really on it today. Some of the little moves and passing they were putting together was just outstanding. And I thought, okay, Liverpool are in for it here, especially given the makeup of their back five. I mean, Virgil van Dijk was playing, but you had, young Bradley, you had Kwanzaa, Joe Gomez was playing left back, and Kevin Kelleher was in goals. As great as Kevin has been. But yeah, look, I think a draw was probably fair enough. In terms of a result, Liverpool came on strong in the second half. Should they've had a penalty at the death? Yes, absolutely. I don't understand how that wasn't given as a penalty. I actually agree with Jurgen Klopp at the end of the game. If it was anywhere else on the pitch, it would have been given as a penalty. It's a high boot. Like, how can you deny that? But no, generally, look, I know that game yesterday didn't have as many goals or potentially as kind of thrilling moments have we seen in some of these games between the sides in the past. But I thought it was a really, really high quality game, especially just considering that Liverpool were missing a lot of key players, and Salah only played, half an hour in the second half and things like that. I thought it was great. And I think it's actually a really good result for Liverpool, considering they will get stronger. They've got players to come back as well. I think it's a really creditable point. And I actually saw the statistic flash up on Sky's coverage. I think it was Liverpool had scored 24 goals in the 76th minute or later, and had scored 8 goals in the 90th minute or later. And I was fully expecting a Liverpool winner at that point, to be honest. It was one of those occasions where at Anfield, you just expect the goal to go in late on. You just expect to hear the roar. It didn't come. It probably should have via penalty. I heard Shay Given on Match of the Day on Sunday night say he didn't think it was a penalty. I thought that was a very, very strange call from Shay. But yeah, generally speaking, I thought it was a really high quality game. I thought the City goal was absolutely brilliant as well. Fair play. I think the set piece coach is Carlos Vincens. I think Pep turned around to him and pointed to him after Stones turned it in, because it was a really, really clever set piece goal.
Yeah, now we've got a run in, Graham, 10 games to go for these 3 teams, and hopefully they do stay quite close to each other, because it's not often that you get 3 teams kind of going for it, with that much quality between the 3 teams and also the 3 managers as well. But who do you think is going to be happier from that draw between Liverpool and City, and how do you see it playing out now over the stretch that's coming?
I have to say, I thought it was an exhilarating game. I really enjoyed it. And what makes them exhilarating is the tension that's in the game and knowing what's at stake. But knowing what's at stake in the moments in the game when they've given the ball away here, they could score, or here's a Man City are building a really good attack. Oh, here's a chance, because you just know what's coming with both teams and the quality they have. So the fact that the quality and what's at stake and the tactical battles in the game, I thought was exhilarating watch. It was brilliant. Such a high quality game of football in terms of on an individual level and 1v1s and things like that. With what you see with Haaland and Van Dijk going at each other, which is brilliant, which is what you want to see. They played with no protection at times to go, well, if you turn her over, we're going to be open. Both teams are like that. But I also then thought the tactical battles of how Liverpool fixed their midfield to combat the first 15 minutes of Man City was brilliant. I think Man City would be happier walking away from there with a point, considering the performance in the second half. I think where I'd agree with everything that Barry said there, but I don't think a draw was a fair result. I think Liverpool probably deserved to win the game in terms of City had the first 20 minutes. I thought City were brilliant. I really feared for the worst for Liverpool, and again, so I agree with Barry on this. That the back four and the keeper, I thought Liverpool will do well to contain this with that, because they probably haven't experienced anything like that before. Kwanzaa, Bradley, Joe Gomez, who I think has been excellent, I have to say, and full credit to him. Trent has gone out injured, he's covered in there. Robertson has gone out injured, he's covered in there. Tsimikas has gone out injured, he's covered in there. He's played centre midfield at times. He went into centre midfield and then went back to right back when Bradley went off. He's been excellent. He's one of those players that deserves so much credit. I think Liverpool were brilliant especially in the second half. Diaz is unlucky with a few chances. He should have done better with others. But like, again, what Barry said, Jota's out. He's an unbelievable finisher. Salah's out. Trent Alexander's out, who brings a lot of creativity and can go and play in beside Enzo in the six. McAllister's been excellent. So I think City will walk away, breathing a little bit of sigh of relief, because the second half, they probably got caught in the headlights a little bit. And it's not often you say that about City. I don't mean, and caught in the headlights is a bit of a strange statement to make about a team that's won 3 in a row. I don't mean that. I mean the waves of attack that was coming from Liverpool, the atmosphere and everything around it. And you just never see City like that. You never see City not dominate a game at times. They tried to kill it, but I think they needed to play at the tempo that Liverpool were playing at. And then once Liverpool won it back, they were away and they had the quality to hurt them. But it was a really, really top game of football. And throw Arsenal into that, because I watched the last half an hour of Arsenal against Brentford, and the pace they were playing at, the power they were playing at, and it was wave of attack from them, and they're constantly trying to break down the door, and there's a push and there's a relentlessness in them. And I think with Saliba at the back and Gabriel, they have that power that they can leave them 1v1, which is what Liverpool and Man City have been able to do over the last few years, which is leave a Van Dijk 1v1, knowing that their pace will help them and get them out of trouble. And I think Arsenal have that, which means that they can commit for more players to the attacking third. So to call it, I don't know. I just don't.
Good answer.
I think City's last 5 games, I think they'll blitz.
Yeah.
But I think Liverpool are fighting on 3 fronts as well. They have the FA Cup, it's the UEFA Cup, and they have obviously the league. Arsenal are in the Champions League, which are going to touch on as well, and they're in for the league. And City are fighting in the FA Cup, the Champions League, and the league as well. So Arsenal might think, but because they don't have the distraction in the FA Cup. Are Arsenal in the FA Cup?
No, they're out. They have a few weeks off after the Porto game.
So that's where that might favour them. But then obviously they have a tough game against Porto in the Champions League. Jamie Carragher made an interesting point. If City got Arsenal in the Champions League and you put 2 of their games against each other in, that could tip the balance to Liverpool, and that's the margins that will tip the balance in this. So it makes for a really, really excitable run in for the first time in a long time.
Yeah, and we'll finish on the Champions League now. So Arsenal v Porto is going to be live at 7:30 on RTÉ2 and RTÉ Player on Tuesday night, and Arsenal trailing 1-0 from the first leg at the Dragao. And you touched on that Brentford game, and Arsenal have been blitzing teams for the last few weeks up until Brentford, who are very streetwise, as we've seen before. I know they're not having a brilliant season this time round, but they're very streetwise. Porto are a team that you would also stay with the amount of experience they have, and I think Pepe is probably the one you'd mention in that mold anyway. That they are incredibly streetwise, very experienced at this level of European football. So that was probably the perfect game at the weekend for Arsenal to sort of build into what is going to be a huge game on Tuesday. With the benefit of having the Emirates crowd behind them, but against a very tough, if slightly struggling Porto, at least domestically.
Yeah, like the Arsenal probably had a lot of possession over in Porto, but Porto had some chances in the game of counter-attack set pieces and stuff. For all Arsenal, I think they had 65% possession. They only mustered 7 shots on the evening, where Porto gets 8 with their 35% possession. So it just shows you the goal they score. Galano is wonderful. He just checks inside and bends, and what a time to score. Gives them something to hang on to going there. Arsenal have become, again, relentless tactically. They're really good. I think Arteta's getting better tactic in terms of when to play Jorginho, when not to play him. Rice has been able to go when Jorginho's playing and give them that legs in midfield if he wants to go and join in. You've seen that with the goal he scores at the weekend. So they have been better, breaking down teams that are defensively solid at times. Do they have that person in the box that's going to stay in between the posts and score goals? Havertz does that really well at the weekend. He's in between the goals, gets a header. But yeah, I think with the momentum with Arsenal, you'd expect them to go and maybe expect them to score 2 goals at home to make sure they're through against Porto. But you just never know with Arsenal in the Champions League. It's not something they have a great relationship with, or something that you feel that they're really hyped about. I think that they're more concentrating on the league this year because of what happened last year. But I do feel that if they put on a performance, they should have enough to overturn the 1-0 deficit against Porto.
Yeah, and I'll give you the final word on this, Barry, because it's only a few years ago they were playing Dundalk in the group stages of the Europa League. So obviously you look at how far they've come. Getting back to Champions League contention, title contention as well. As Graham touched on there, they have a weird relationship with European football in the way that, as a huge club as they are, it's probably the one thing you'd point at them in comparison to some of their rivals that is the one thing missing. And they have a great chance this year, really, if they go for it. I mean, it's only really City, maybe Inter, Real Madrid would be the 3 you would say might be a little either ahead of them or just very slightly.
Bayern.
Yeah, well, Bayern as well if they get going.
Yeah, but I think for Arsenal, a run to the semi-final is within their wheelhouse. I don't think anyone would have any great expectations that they'd go further than that necessarily. I mean, maybe if they get to the last 4 and they just go for it, that's something they could do. But I'd be of the same opinion of Graham. I think Arsenal probably will have too much for Porto tomorrow, and they will get through to the quarterfinals. The only problem is, as Graham was describing the first leg there, it was very much a Porto didn't have much of the ball, counter-attack type thing. I think they'll go to the Emirates with the same approach. Arsenal need to score, so Porto can just wait and spring on them. And obviously, if they get 1 goal, then it's going to be a difficult task then for Arsenal. I still feel that, they will be too strong for them ultimately. Porto, to be fair to them, I think they've reached the last 16 of the Champions League 8 times the last 12 seasons. So when the draws are kind of made, it's very much that's a good draw for Arsenal. But they've been in the last 8 of the quarter of the Champions League a lot more than Arsenal have in the last decade or so. So it's not a given. Their record is one that kind of superpower type clubs would be envious of. I can name a couple from the Premier League that would be envious of Porto's record. I still think Arsenal will probably have too much of them. David Raya coming back in goals will be a boost after the weekend, given Aaron Ramsdale's kind of issues. I know he made a couple of good saves, but it was only redeeming himself after a mistake, and that's a very Arsenal thing to do. Do you give Arsenal credit for pulling through and winning in the end, or do you sort of question why they put themselves in that situation in the first place? It's very, very Arsenal, but I think they'll get through.
Yeah, and we'll find out Tuesday night, 7:30 on RTÉ2 and the RTÉ Player. So that's Arsenal against Porto. And then on Friday, Galway United against Shamrock Rovers. So live coverage of that SSE Electricity Men's Premier Division fixture. But Barry Landy, thanks very much for your time today, and Graham Gartland as well. And we'll be back next week.
Brilliant. Thanks, lads.
Thanks, boys.